Okay, hey everyone. Welcome to another Sunday Suave stream. Today, I want to keep making some progress on our Suave Keys application, which is, if you're new here, our voice-powered keyboard and controller that we're working on with the goal of enabling both people with certain disabilities as well as really anyone, I guess, to be able to supplement their normal interactions with their hands by using their voice as well. So, for example, playing games like Call of Duty, we experimented with being able to give commands for shooting, jumping, reloading, all that. We did some with Dark Souls, and now we're actually building it as a means of a true production application and product that lets people sign in, link their accounts, then give commands over their virtual assistants or over their given apps, whatever platform they're on, and actually issue commands that go through over their desktop or whatever their end client is. And usually routing through USB keyboard commands via our Arduino, which we actually just plug in. So today we're going to be focusing on actually setting up user authentication, user storage and preferences and all that, and really just focused on the API, which is all ASP.NET Core. So we'll be doing quite a bit of that stuff. I also wanted to just show I finally got a capture card thanks to one of my friends. So once we start to get into some Mac stuff, we can very easily just be like, ooh, Mac side, Windows side, Mac side, Windows side, and I got my little MacBook over here. So today we'll probably stick in Windows because we're just going to be working on our API. Yeah, so I haven't done too much with actually implementing my own OAuth provider yet, and that's going to be sort of the key thing. So just some sort of notes here. Let me see if I can pull up the diagram and explain it. Let's see, we've got draw IO. Open diagram, which I can't remember where we put it, somewhere in here. Some XML file in here somewhere. It ain't that. No open recents or anything. Where did we put this thing? I'll have to find it some other time. So basically, like with all these different channels that we're allowing someone to actually use to control their keyboard, we need to have the ability to sign in on both sides of that. So like the whole application and the whole platform is basically this like stream of pipeline between two different apps, and whichever two apps can definitely change. So like, for example, you could be using an Alexa device, and then the end outlet could be your desktop on Windows, which is, I think, probably going to be one of the more common ones. But you can now swap Alexa out with like Google, Bixby, an Android app where you talk to it, an iOS app. And then on the other side, you can also swap. It might not just be a Windows client. It could be a Mac client. It could be a browser. It could be another mobile app, or it could just be directly on the hardware itself. So in order to handle that, we have to be able to authenticate on both sides, regardless of which platform we come from. And so in order to do that, we have to implement some standards, and we have to implement it in a way that works with each of those different sort of channels or endpoints. And so to do that, we have to implement to the OAuth 2.0 spec. We need implicit grant flow and auth code grant flow, which will have like redirects and stuff like that, which means that we need a few different things in order to support that. So let me zoom in here. We need actual user storage. In this case, we're going to be using ASP.NET Core or ASP.NET Core identity library. We're going to need to have refresh token storage. We need to have client application storage. So this would be like the Alexa info versus the Android app versus desktop app sort of thing, like all those different endpoints.
I'm not sure.
We're going to go ahead and mute that. We need to have our actual auth endpoints for doing all this stuff, and we need a UI for signing in. This is going to be super important for enabling us to actually authenticate it. So basically, the process that we go through for authentication, if we look at like on the Alexa side, let's say, account linking it's called account linking, and the idea is that you basically tell Alexa your OAuth info that you set up for it, which we'll have to set up, and when you do that, it'll actually like throw a card to the user's phone if they haven't signed in yet, and then that will actually like provide them the UI to sign in. It's called an account linking card. Gives them the button, you tap it, takes you to the website where the account can be authenticated. You sign in or sign up, and then from then on, the rest of the experience is authenticated, and that happens by having the actual app, the Alexa skill request, send it through Voicify in our case, then through our webhook, and then we can basically pull out that token and check it against our API, check it against a user, deserialize it, and do whatever we need to with it. So that's the idea. And the same thing is basically true for Google Actions. Let's see, Google Actions account linking. And these are going to be our two main focuses for the first output, because then we'll have the Android app, which will have its own interface for it. So basically, we need at least the web interface, right? This UI for signing in. So this is going to need to be a web app, and it can live in the same place as our server. We could do it like Razor Pages or just MVC or something like that. But we need a UI for signing in the web app, and then eventually we'll also need UI for mobile apps, mobile/desktop, to sign in. And so this one is going to require us going through Authcode grant flow as well as implicit. And this one we can probably just get away with implicit grant flow, which is like just username, password. And this one is like a whole thing of like, you get redirects and you pass in a redirect URL and an auth code, and we need to have certain scopes and stuff. We don't necessarily need to do scope management because the scope's going to be the same, and we'll have the restriction of like not letting people publicly register their apps to use our authentication. So we only have to worry about like our apps and our client secrets that we care about and register, and you can't just go and set them up. So this is like all, we're going to focus mostly on these four for today. So we'll finish setting up user storage, which we started. We'll add refresh token storage, we'll add client application storage, and then we'll go from there, and we'll start actually spinning up the authentication, starting probably with the implicit grant flow. Basically, we'll have some validation set up where like once we pass in, let's say like a username, password, and the client app ID and secret, getting back an access token and hitting an endpoint that we require authorization, that'll be a good first test, because then we have to actually set up the UI for authcode grant flow. In theory, I mean, like technically we could do it with like just redirecting URLs from the API, but that kind of defeats the purpose. So yeah, that's it, and we'll kind of get started here. Oh, in other news, I also got accepted as an intern to Live Coders, which is super exciting. So for those of you who have been here as part of the stream for a while, knew that, you know, one of my goals was to actually get accepted into Live Coders. Thank you, Kenzie. So currently I'm an intern, which basically means that I didn't meet the technical requirements. Let's see if I go to Live Coder Home Issues. We go down to mine that I made. Go see my application here. Look for my name. Where's Suave Pirate? I can probably just do this. Basically just means that they like me enough to want to see me do some more and potentially be a part of a team, but they have some strict numbers with regards to like viewership. So basically I just don't have enough average viewers on my stream, so I need to grow that, and then I'll be part of the full team. But I'm in, which is cool. So we're getting started there. Hopefully that'll help us grow the channel a bit and get some more people involved, because the more people involved in building this type of software, the better off it's going to be. So it's exciting stuff, so I'm really happy about that. But let's get into building our authentication stuff. So last we left off, we added entity framework and identity to our infrastructure data project. Let me know if this is too small too, but our infrastructure data project now has this Suave Keys context. This is our data context that we'll use for interacting with our database, which will be on PostgreSQL. And so what we have here is a custom user called a Suave Keys user that has to inherit from identity user and string. So this allows us to use the ID property as a string, which will be a GUID or a UUID. And then we have a role, which is just inheriting the same identity role with string. But now that these are going to actually be tables that are handled for us, we can start to set up all of our custom stuff and relate them. So for example here, I'm going to create a new one here for refresh tokens. Refresh token. And this entity is going to represent a table that has an ID for the actual refresh token itself that users will be able to use to refresh their access token. And it will have a reference to what the user is, when it was created, when it expires, and all that. So to start, we'll give it an ID. We also need to give it a Suave Keys user ID. and we want to give it a string key or token. That's going to be our actual value that we want to pass back to users. Technically, this will also be another secondary primary key because we want it to be unique, and I'll show you how to do that in the context model builder. But for now, we'll have it as a token, and then I'm going to mark all of these as required. These required tags are used for telling Entity Framework that basically when you're actually going to insert something in here to validate against that. So when we actually add a migration to set up our database, this is going to say like this is a non-nullable string. You have to have an actual value. We can do that for like all of the other things as well. All right, so we've got the main ID, we've got our token, we got the ID of the user that it's referenced to. That's going to be a foreign key, which we'll set up automatically in a little bit. And then we're going to also have a expiration date. These are always going to be UTC timestamps. That's just my preference, is to just kind of always work with UTC. Makes it a lot easier to like follow and do datetime calculations if the database is always on sort of a level set. Let's see, we also need a created date. And we also want to have client ID that was used. So we'll say auth client ID. We're going to end up making a class for this as well in just a sec. So now let's set up our navigation properties. This is a term used in Entity Framework, but also in some other places that are some other ORMs and stuff. But basically, it lets us automatically scaffold some things. So if I say, for example, Suave Keys user, I call this, let's just call it user actually, and therefore this is just user ID. This is basically going to confirm that this user ID property is a foreign key in the database to this table that's represented by Suave Keys user. So that's like the ASP.NET Core or ASP.NET Identity user table, whatever it gets generated as. And then we'll do the same thing for auth client ID, which we need to actually, whoops, not sure how I clicked outside there. There we go. We need to actually set up our auth clients. So we're going to have another table here, or another entity called auth client. And this is also going to have an ID and a secret. And we're also going to have a friendly name, and we'll have a created date and a modified date. Modified date. Make sure I have these on refresh token. We do have created date. We'll have modified date too. So now we can create a relationship there to our auth client. So we can say prop. We'll have auth client, and that'll be called auth client. And now we can do the reversal here to guarantee the one-to-many relationship. We can have a virtual I collection of refresh token called refresh tokens. So this isn't necessarily going to be used for automatically populating. Like we're realistically not going to go to our auth client and say, give me all of the refresh tokens that was used in this app, right? Like that's not something we'd actually care to get the data for. But what it does do is confirm the one-to-many relationship. And because it's virtual, it won't auto-populate either. We'd have to say an explicit include when we make our queries. So not too much to worry about there. Now we also probably want to do the same thing on users to have our one-to-many relationship to refresh tokens. So we're going to have a prop, and then we'll have a virtual I collection of refresh token. We'll call it refresh tokens. So again, just sort of locking in that one-to-many relationship to our tokens, and then from our token to our auth clients as well. So that way when we know that someone signed in, this is basically going to create a refresh token record for it, and then we're sort of good to go from there. So that's that. So now that we have these entities, the models for them anyway, we need to actually reference them from our context. That way we actually get tables created. So the user and the role are going to be taken care of automatically behind the scenes for us by this identity DB context. So now we just need to add DB sets for the other ones. Hey, thanks, Dan. Yeah, so not fully accepted yet, just an intern. I got to get a higher average viewer count up. I'm pretty sure that's probably the stat I'm missing, but we'll get there. Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I can't wait to learn how to actually do this stuff better and reach more people. and teach more people too. So pretty cool stuff. Anyway, where were we? We need to have a DB set of refresh tokens. Call it refresh tokens, and we also want a DB set. DB set of our auth clients. Right, so now when we actually start to add migrations, this will handle basically telling us, telling our database and our migrations like, hey, we got to have these tables. And now as we start to make changes to it, we'll be good to go. So some other stuff we can do here, I'm going to override the model creating. And what we can do here is say like builder.entity, and when we have the refresh token, there's a key has alternate key, and this time we can actually either do the property name or the selector for the property. So if we say like refresh token and we want the token, basically it's just saying like, hey, this property is now also going to be considered an alternate primary key, which means we also get the enforcement of like they have to be unique, which is very important because when we start to authenticate someone with a refresh token, if we were to ever have a situation where one user got a refresh token that also is the same as another user's, then they're actually going to have the ability to like use it and sign in as someone else potentially. If they knew the email and they had the client ID in secret, you could technically get around it. So we have to guarantee that it's always unique, and then we'll also be able to like specify how we create the token and generate it. Which there's some like cool stuff you can do. You can like create property generators, which we'll probably do in a little bit, but for now I'll just like generate a GUID and then base64 encode it, and we'll call it that as a token, since these are temporary anyway. Cool. Now we've got our context, we've got our entities. We need to actually set up our startup stuff for Postgres and start to add our app settings for it as well. That way we can actually get some things running. So to do that, what I'm going to do is add a new connection string, and we can do that from within our app settings. So I think if we add the default connection strings, and then we can have a default connection string, or we'll just say like, I always hate naming these things. We'll call it default connection. I knew I was missing something. Default connection string. And so this is going to be in the development side, just a reference to a local Postgres instance that's running. So we'll generate a password. This will only be on my machine, so I'll just smash some random keys and stuff in here. But what I want to do is just go grab the connection string because I've got it over here somewhere else. And then we'll be good to go. So I want to do this and this and this. I'm just going to go grab my local string because I hate actually writing it. So we're going to end up wanting to create a new user for this. So Suave Keys, and I'm going to just generate some string. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I've got this value here for my string now. So what I'm saying is that I'm going to have a user called Suave Keys. Here's the password. It's just like a random set of characters. And then it's going to be running on localhost. We've got a database called Suave Keys. So we can go from there and actually pull it in. So what I need to do now is actually create this user account, which I can do by going into pgadmin. I've got Postgres installed locally and running, so all I have to do is actually set up, let's see which tab it opens in. Sure, opening Chrome. One second. I want to create a new server. So what I can do is create a new server, and we're going to call Suave Keys, just like we said before. And then we're going to create a new connection, which is our local host. I'm not sure why it needs this. Actually, you know what? We just need to create the user account. So if I expand Postgres here, ooh, can I remember my local password? I can. Cool. So I'm going to create a new user account here. That's not what I want. Postgres, login user groups. I'm going to create a new one called Suave Keys. Please go away. And I'm going to say that they can log in and they can create databases and they can create roles. And I need to give it the password, which is going to be the one that we put here. And it'll never expire, and I can connect as many times as I want. Now we should be able to hit save. Cool, so now that we have that user, we can actually let, oops, didn't mean to totally close that, but we can actually let our app and entity framework start to do the work for us, because it's basically going to sign in with that user that we just created, and then it'll be able to create this database on our local machine here. So that's all we got to worry about. So to do that, we need to actually go to our startup now and add references and configuration for our entity framework stuff. So see if I can remember how to do this. Services.add entity framework. There's something in here. And I just gotta look it up. Oh, let me pull this over here. Hold on, I've got it in here somewhere. Where are you? It's somewhere in here where I have this shared code, but it's also with a whole bunch of other stuff. Not clients, infra. This is what I wanted. Add DB context, which I need to pull in a namespace for, maybe? Not Voicify though. We've got Suave Keys context. And what did we call it here? We had default connection. And hopefully we've got the right library. Okay, cool. So basically what we're saying is we're telling our web client to use PostgreSQL with this database context. This is how we say use Postgres, use MPG SQL, and the connection string is the one we're going to pull from our local development one. So as long as we're running with the ASP.NET Core environment set to development, that should get pulled in, presumably. And so what we can do now is actually either open the command line or the package manager console and see if we can't get this to actually run. So if I say package manager console, we need to set the default project to where entity framework is, where our context is, which is our infrastructure data project, and we have to make sure that our startup project is set to Suave Keys API. And now what I can do is say add migration, and I'll say initial. Add migration is not recognized. What are you talking about? I might be missing a command line tool here. Let's see. Entity framework, add migration. Entity framework core, add migration. Oh look, that's the one that they use too. Cool. Yeah, so that's basically the gist. Create an initial migration, open in File Explorer, command. Oh yeah, see this is what I was like, I guess we can do it from the command line, but I want to do it from the package manager console, just so I don't have to like have a bunch of command lines open separately. There's basically like a CLI tool we can add that'll do it, or we can just do it this way. Fine. Enter command in the address bar and hit enter. Oh, you can just do that? This is so weird. It literally wants us to open it in File Explorer, then type command here. First of all, I didn't even know you could do that in Windows, so we're going to just try to do it this way. Okay, so open in File Explorer. Alright, we got this. Now type command, What? And now we need to, I'm gonna pin this and pin this. Hopefully we can call .NET here. .NET tool install global .NET EF. Uh-oh. You're attempting to install preview. Oh, it might already be installed. Let's see. .NET EF migrations add initial. Specify command or file was not found. Okay, so super cool docs. .NET EF is not found. Is that just not even what it's called anymore? Oh, it's trying to like look for a local. Oh, it's trying to look for one of my private NuGet feeds. Hold on, I might need to like remove that from my NuGet options. NuGet package sources. Remove some of this experimental stuff. I don't want that. Just give me the. Yeah, fine. All right, let's try this again. Nope. It's not compatible with 3.0, so we need to explicitly install 3.1. Can I do that? How do I specify the version? Version 3.0. Cannot invoke the tool using the following. Oh wait, you can invoke the tool. Okay. Successfully installed. Alright, so now let's try this .NET EF migrations add initial. Although there's something we have to do to specify the project that we're running it under, because this is going to assume that our context is in the same project. Although maybe not. Let's just try it. We might end up having to do something where we specify build failed. Yikes. Hold on. What could pop? Build succeeded. Liar. You just try it again. Okay, we need Entity Framework Design installed, and we also need to. I still think we have to like explicitly reference our infrastructure.data project. But either way, let's go to NuGet packages. Actually, no, hold on. I think it's just because we're supposed to be hitting the other one. Let me just look this up. EF core CLI set project. EF migrations add. Yeah. No, I want 3. Okay, maybe we do need to do this. And we should make sure it's the same version as the one we have installed for all the other stuff. It's like the latest 3.01 because we don't have 3.1 installed yet. 3.03 sounds right. Maybe now we can use the package manager console. Let's see. Nope. Why? Why, SpongeBob? Okay, we'll try from here again. Go. It does. You're a liar. Startup project doesn't reference this, but it so totally does. Microsoft Entity Framework Design. Microsoft Entity Framework Core Design. Do we need the specific design tool? Like the Postgres one? Let's see. Entity Framework Core NPG SQL. I don't think we need this when we have these two. but maybe we do. Maybe I just need to build. I'm like, damn, .NET, you're really not making this easy. Doesn't match your migrations assembly. Either change your target project or change the migrations assembly. How do I do that? The migrations assembly is the one containing it. Change your target project to the like, how do I just do that? That's all I want to know. Can I do it in here now? Since I can just specify in the UI? Nope. It's super weird that it doesn't recognize it. Maybe I need the design tool installed here. Maybe. Entity framework core design. How is add migration not found? Like, what am I missing here? Use SQL Server connection. This is so funny. This is literally giving me the error that I would expect to see here. There's got to be like some command line argument I can give. .NET EF. What is it saying? Target project. How do I specify the project though? Start a project. Thank you. Can I just specify by name now? So if I do -p, can I do Suave Keys .infrastructure.data? Or is it like a relative path? Or did I just spell it wrong? Suave Keys infrastructure.data. Or do I need like the full CS proj? Nope. Alright, if we have to relative path it, and it would be, let's see, where are we? //Suave Keys infrastructure.data. That feels like it's trying to do something. Alright, we have a migration. So now we can call update database. So we do .NET EF database update. I'm gonna just be safe and specify the project again. Infrastructure.data/Suave Keys infrastructure data CS proj. So once this is done, assuming all is well, and it is, if we open up pgadmin again, I should have Suave Keys, and we should have some tables in here like refresh token and auth clients and ASP.NET users, and look at that, we got everything. So now we can actually start working with that data. Okay, we have a database running locally. We have it hooked up via our database context, which means now we can actually start to query stuff. So we need to build some repositories for getting our like refresh tokens and our auth clients and stuff like that, and then we're going to build an authentication service that can do some of this stuff for us and talk to the sign-in manager and all that, and then we'll build the API endpoints to do it as well. So to start, I'm going to add a new folder in our core because we're going to be building some repositories called repositories. And I'm going to have in my business one called services. So if we have an iRefresh token repository, interface, we're going to want to be able to find a refresh token asynchronously. So we'll have task of refresh token. So that's what we want to return, which means we need a reference to our models. We'll say find by token, and we'll take the token in. We'll return the full refresh token. And then we're going to want to have another interface. We'll have an OAuth client repository. Basically, all of our query logic is going to be housed in these. I normally actually like the generic repository pattern, which like lets us access it more like a list. But for now, we only need a few specific methods, so I'm not too worried about it. So in this case, we want to be able to get an auth client by ID and secret. So let's say we've got a task auth client. Find by ID and secret. String ID, string secret. And now we just got to implement these. So to do that, I'm going to have a repository base. So we'll have a base entity repository. This is just to guarantee that we're using this to access our DB context. So if I have like a protected, what do we call it? Suave Keys context. Call it context. And then we need to have a constructor that takes it in. So I'll have Suave Keys context, call it context. We'll set context to context. Basically just nice to have a rule set here where we can get access to it without having to basically do this in every single implementation. So now if we build a refresh token repository, it's public. This is going to inherit from our base entity one. And we're going to also implement the iRefresh token repository, which means we're going to need to bring in that project reference. And then we can do some fun auto magical stuff, generate the constructor that calls the base one, and then we can implement the interface. So another thing I want to add to this base is a private property here. We'll just call it, let's make this of generic type. So I have a public or a protected T, and we'll call this data set. And we'll say context.set of T. What doesn't this like? T must be a reference type. Yes, so we need to have where T is inheriting from class and new. DB set of T to T. Oh yeah, that's what we want. DB set. Not just a regular T. We need to actually just get the table. There we go. We'll call this data. Even easier. Okay. So now, like in our refresh token repository, in this find token async, we can make this async now, and then we can say return data. Oh, we need to specify the type here too. Duh. Say data dot where r. Give me link r dot token equals token. And then we can say first or default async. And we need to await this. And that's all there is to it. If we ever need to make changes or like include other things, we can like use the dot include, which lets us specify like, hey, if we want to get the user that this is associated with, we can do that, which we might actually want to do. So let's do that. So we'll say include and we'll include the user record here. So that'll make sure that we're always actually pulling in that user property when we get it. Otherwise, the user property on our refresh token might be null. Cool. So we have a refresh token repository. Let's go do our repository for auth client. Auth client repository. So we'll inherit our base, our auth client, and implement auth client repository. So as we start to basically find ourselves needing more methods and more data access, we'll be able to just add them to our interface and then implement them here. So in this case, this one will also be pretty straightforward, but we're going to return await data dot where, and we want, come on, give me link, a dot id equals id and a dot secret equals secret. And then we'll say dot first or default async. Sweet. Come on, get rid of the error. So like we're gonna need the ability to like add refresh tokens, add auth clients and stuff like that. Although I think like for the sake of these auth clients, I might just add them by hand to the database and not have like some admin endpoints or anything like that. So that way we can stick to sort of the simple stuff of just trying to access it. But then for the refresh token stuff, we're also going to need the ability to add it. So we can say like we've got a public async task of refresh token. We'll say add async, and this can take in a refresh token entity, and we'll return await data dot add async entity. We can't just return that. We say await, and then we'll return the entity back out. So technically, even if you don't pass in an ID, like this is where this add async will actually like call it the method to add it and have the ID. So like because we have string IDs, Entity Framework will automatically generate the GUID after we call add async. So this returned one, although it's going to be a reference type, so you can still just reference the same one, but the returned one will actually have the updated value, which will be nice. And we do need the ability to commit these changes as well. So I'm going to add another public async task, and we'll say save changes async, and we'll call await context save changes async. That way we can just sort of expose the transactional side of it to the service layer that can control when and where it needs to actually make those calls, which can be nice. So we just need to make sure that this also exists on our other repositories on the interfaces. So for now, this is the only one that's saving, so we'll only put it on this one. But if we start to implement some more, we can abstract it and give it a generic or something like that. Awesome. So we've got the ability now to add, which we need to now add to the interface as well. So if we go back to iRefresh token repository, we need to make sure we can call it from the interface. So we've got add async, find async. We're going to also need the ability to delete it. So we'll say task refresh token delete by ID. We don't need the async. Delete by ID penalty string ID. And so to implement this, we basically just need to find it and delete it. So we'll go to our refresh token, implement. You can say var entity equals await data dot find. Actually, I think we can call dot find, but we'll say first or default async. And we can add this extra where clause, I believe. So we can say where our refresh tokens ID equals ID. And then we can say if entity does not equal null, then we'll call await data. What doesn't this like? Oh, we need the async. Remove, or is this is an async, so we'll just say remove entity. Boom, easy. and then we'll return the entity out either way. Alright, so we've got find, add, delete. I don't think we really need update or anything, because basically the way that refresh tokens work is that whenever we use a refresh token to re-authenticate, we want to delete that refresh token that was used and create a new one and then hand that back to the user, just like as if they signed in with their password, so they can stay signed in and all that. So we'll start with this. Just add, find, delete, and that should be good to go. So let's go add some authentication service. So in core business, again, this is where our interfaces are for business logic. I'm going to say iUser authentication service. The reason I'm calling it iUser authentication service is to separate it from the built-in identity one called authentication service, which we'll end up wanting to use within this to sign in. But this helps us actually keep the interface and separate it. So if we have a task, and we're going to need like a token response and stuff like that, but we basically need to have a task that returns all of our authentication information and takes in like username, password, client ID, client secret, and then another one that also takes in like the refresh token one. So what we can do is create a transfer model, and in this case we don't need the voicify stuff, so we're going to call this authentication transfer models, and we'll have a token response, and this will have a access token, refresh token, oops, string, come on, refresh token. We'll have a access token expiration, and a refresh token expiration, and we'll even have a user ID. And now we also need the authentication request. So we'll have an authentication request. This is going to take in a string for client ID, string client secret, string username, string password, string. Hey Cassie, this makes me miss. Oh yeah, if you've been doing a lot of Python lately, come back to C#. It's so lovely over here. What do we need? Password. We also need refresh token. Basically, what we're gonna do with these requests is this is what we're gonna actually be taking in from our API, whether it's directly through this model or we map something. This stuff is always going to be required. These are optional depending on which grant type we have. So for example, we have like password or refresh token, and depending on which one of these you have to have one of these. That's the idea. Technically we could make them, maybe we should make these a little different, but we could have like a class that inherits this, that actually implements grant type and explicit like get only. Like if we had a password authentication request, we could just force this to password and then require this. But yeah, Cassie, I feel that whenever I have to go do like Kotlin stuff or TypeScript, I always just miss all of the goodness in C# and Visual Studio, although VS Code's not bad. But coming from Python, where like you don't even have the type safety, is probably got to be pretty annoying. Okay, let's see here. We've got our model, so now we need to, in our user authentication service, we're going to have a task of token response. We need our models, and we'll have an authenticate user. Yeah, the VS tooling for TypeScript is nice. I feel like I still just use VS Code for everything TypeScript-y. Yeah, okay, yeah, that's what I was going to say. I haven't done too much with TypeScript in full Visual Studio. Just like whenever I start up like a React and TypeScript app, which is usually what I'm doing, it's just I just go to VS Code and use my go-to template. Let's see, this needs to take an authentication request called request. Okay, so basically like this is going to authenticate the user. We're going to call this our yeah, that's fine. Authenticate the user with either password or refresh token. Basically, we'll have a single endpoint that we call. We pass it into this. We get the response. We send it down, and then we can go from there. So now let's implement it. If we go to our infrastructure business, which is where all of our good old implementation details are, have a services folder here. We're going to add a new class for user authentication service. Right. So there are some things in here that like the identity process can use and just do for us. The reason why we can't just strictly use that is because we really have to support a number of different ways of authenticating. We talked about this a little bit before, but basically with this app, because we have both sides of like the pipeline that need to authenticate, and we have like 5 different ways we have to do it, we need to like be able to handle those all in like some custom ways, which just means that we have more work we have to do. We can't just let identity do it. We can just like provide a single like Auth0 or Okta without like really trying to work around it. Plus, it's nice to do this from scratch anyway, other than having to worry about like password hashing and user management, which is nice that we can still use that from identity. So in order to do this authentication, we need a few things pulled in. So we need a private read-only of our iRefresh token repository, because I also don't think that identity handles our refresh tokens for us, does it? Like, there's nothing in here. Oh wait, we have user tokens. Maybe it does. I haven't even used this in a while. Either way, we're gonna carry on. Too late. So this is refresh token repo. We're gonna need a private read-only OAuth client repository. And we honestly need a private read-only authentication service, ironically, because that is going to be what this can't find. Why would it open it in installed? Do we only need abstractions? Ooh, that only has 2.2. Hold on. What version of identity do we have installed? It's going to be in here. 303. Is that dependent? ASP.NET Core identity. What if we just do ASP.NET Core identity? Wow, that's also only 2.2. That's fine. We're gonna install this. I think this will have identity core. I don't need the UI. Identity. Oh, it's in extensions. Does this have that library? Basically, there's the auth service, which I can actually call to like just pass in username and password, and then it works. Member modified public. Oh yeah, we'll get there. Does this have it? No, please. Either way, we'll call this authentication service. Ah. Did my package not install? Let me just comment this out for now. Where'd it go? Extensions. Okay, so that wasn't it. Identity. Why is this still only the old one? I give up. We're going to try this one. See if this gets us our user manager or authentication manager. Ugh. 303 is not compatible with .NET Standard. Is our infra data 2.1? Oh, it is. Okay, so this also needs to be 2.1. Let me install you. Man, I should have just not used identity. I debated it so much in my head whether I should use identity or not. And I'm kind of regretting it. User manager. It's like Authentication Manager. That's the O in one. Ugh, hold on, let's go back to the docs. Not that. I want entity framework, identity, authentication stuff. Entity framework core. Yeah. Maybe I'm just doing more work than I need to. ASP.NET Core Identity Refresh Tokens. I swear if I find my old blog post on this. That's old. I still think you have to do it yourself. Ugh, I'm not watching a video. Yeah. Yeah, see, I thought, yeah, you still have to do it yourself. Oh, see, it's pretty similar to what we were doing. What's this user service? Authenticate, context, users. Oh, that's not good. You can't do that. That literally just means that the password's not actually hashed. That's what I don't want to do. That's no good. That's no good at all. Jason Watmore, you gotta hash your passwords. Alright, let's see. ASP.NET Core Identity Authentication Service. This is all I wanted. Authenticating a user. Yes. Oh, they use the handler stuff now. Authentication schemes, authentication is responsible for constructing the user identity. Is this gonna do it for me? Don't need the challenges. You don't need that. Wait, is that really it? Do they have like that much pre-built stuff in here? Stop. It's not that easy. Hold on. Now I gotta see if I'm just doing this overkill. Alright, let's do this. Right. Oh my gosh. Maybe I can actually just use all the stuff from identity here and save myself some time. Alright, so we got our SQL set up. This should be Suave Keys user and Suave Keys context. Where does this add default identity come from though? What am I missing there? Identity server. That's what I want. Manage NuGet packages. We want 303. Eventually we'll get everything upgraded to 3.1, but for now we're sitting old school. Alright, so that's cool. They just got rid of that error for us. Alright, we got add default identity. And I want this to add API authorization. Why doesn't it like that? Help set up some default ASP.NET Core and yeah, but where is that? Oh, it does find it. Hold on. Cannot be used. Generic T context to user. There's no implicit reference conversion from Suave Keys context to I persisted grant DB context. What? Is this because my... What does my DB context need to inherit? User manager, see? That's all I wanted. Sign-in manager. Is that where it came from? Are you really? Help me, Cassie. I can't figure it out. I want to just use some identity stuff and not all of it. Is there no interface for sign-in manager? Or is it because I need the type? Yeah, same. Alright, ASP.NET. See, it's only going up to 2.2. Like, I don't even think I can use this. But this is in 3.1. What is, like, the NuGet package I'm missing here? Like, I think I'm just literally missing some specific NuGet package. Ugh, I should have just created the project with, the individual user accounts and just let it do it for me. Maybe it's not too late for that. This feels like it's like, it says I'm in 3.1, but this doesn't feel like 3.1. Yeah, that's basically what I was thinking of doing. I'm already working off of some stuff here that I don't need to keep, so let's do this. We're gonna need more than just the API anyway, so it might make sense to have a different project. Alright, we're gonna do a new ASP.NET Core web app. We'll call it suavekeys.webclient, or just web, because it's not only the client. Create. Alright, I want a web app, and I want individual user accounts. Actually, I need the API one with user accounts. API, individual user accounts. Wait, why would I need to do it over AD? What? But it does, okay, if you do API, it requires you to set up Active Directory. That's why it's confusing as hell. Store user accounts in-app. That was not an option for API. So it can't just scaffold it for me. Ugh. Fine. No, I'm not using Active Directory. I want to actually store my own user accounts. So the goal for this is to be able to let people use like Alexa, Google Assistant, Bixby, a custom Android app, a custom iOS app, and a Windows app to authenticate and then start giving voice commands that will actually control their keyboard, which means that they also have to be authenticated on that end. So like plug in my voice keyboard, which is just like a little Arduino Leonardo. And then there's a Windows app you have to run that basically handles all the transaction over WebSockets. So once you plug that in, you have to sign in on the client side, and you have to sign in on like the end like voice channel, which is why I need like 3 different types of authentication for the same user account. We need to have OAuth, auth code grant flow, and implicit grant flow for the different voice apps, and we need, I guess like essentially custom implicit grant flow for each of the client apps. That way I don't have to open up a web page. But we need the actual physical web page in the end anyway. That's why I kind of wanted to control a little bit more of it myself. But we can see how far we can get with this setup. Okay. Did it add it yet? All right, here's web. So if we go to packages, identity.ui.3o. So this probably is what contain the other stuff. Identity stores, identity JSON. I just don't like that all of these projects scaffold with the assumption that you're gonna put like everything in this one project. Like I don't like having my DB context in my project. It already made the migrations. Like it's already assuming I'm using SQL, and it's assuming that I want to put this here. So I'm gonna start cleaning this up and try pointing it at mine. So if we take this, and it does that, which is annoying. I don't want the default. Okay, so now in our startup, basically everywhere where we were using application DB context, we can swap that for Suave Keys context. And instead of identity user, we want Suave Keys user. Please. And there's probably something else in here in the pages talking to some stuff. Alright, let's see if I can build. And we might just be able to run this and see what happens. Detected downgrade. Yeah, we don't want that. Alright, let's see what we can upgrade. So these ones I want all on 303. Update. So I gotta match the other one. And I probably have to do it in a specific order. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna do it from the project file. 303, 303. Please all have 303s. I don't need SQL Server. What I do need is my Postgres one. This one. And let's restore. Okay. This I want to take from my other one too. Yeah, whatever. Oops, I need to take the whole thing. Okay, can I build, please? We still have this. We might not even need this stuff, so we'll see. Errorless, what else? Data does not exist. Yeah, don't bring that in. Build succeed. Alright, let's see what happens if we run our web client. So this should have scaffolded like all the identity UI and stuff too. Which also means that we have to go actually rewrite that stuff. Uh-oh. Cannot load Razor runtime 303. Probably because it doesn't exist. Dependencies, packages. Yeah, what was that error there? Hold on, I want to look into that a little more. ASP.NET Core Razor runtime 303. Can't find. Sweet. So probably one of these upgrades I did is not actually like a valid version. .303 is there. 303 is there. Like, what are we missing? Did I delete something I wasn't supposed to? I thought I discovered a sequel. We'll just clean and run it again, see what happens. Come on, nope. Why? No kidding. Alright, maybe I just need to explicitly install it. Oh wait, why is it looking for that? Yeah, there is no... What? There is no Razor runtime 303. It only goes to 2.2. So why did this get all blown up? It's literally a brand new project. Let's see. Maybe this runtime compilation one has it. Nope. Ugh, come on, man. I literally can't just spin up a new project and run it. Maybe I should have done it without Razor pages and it actually would have worked. Why? Why do you do this to me? Yeah, okay. Something just weird going on. Something else targeting the wrong framework. What could possibly be targeting the wrong framework? Everything here is 3.0'd. 3.0 and 2.1 standard, 2.1 standard. Is it because these are 2.0s? Like, I can't imagine that has anything to do with it, but we'll make them all 2.1s. I don't know why it would even try to be referencing a NuGet package like that. And add default identity. Why here? Add default identity. Oh, we need to call add Razor pages, but that's not gonna matter anyway. Oh, it is called. What am I missing? It's failing to reference it even just from this stupid little thing. just get rid of the options call. Why at this point does it try to reference Razor pages or the Razor runtime? Why would it do that? Why? I'm about to just drop identity, honestly, and just pull in my own password hasher. Honestly, is probably the move. Yep, I'm over it. I'm over trying to work with identity. We're gonna just go back to what we were doing here. All right, so let's strip some stuff out. For example, we can technically keep the model. That's fine. I'm gonna get rid of the role because I don't need role management. And then for our DB context, instead of inheriting from identity DB context, we're just gonna inherit from DB context. And we'll have an explicit DB set of, I'm just gonna call it users. We're not even gonna inherit from this anymore. We're just gonna do it ourselves. All right, so we're gonna have a prop string ID, prop string first name, prop string last name. We're gonna need an email address. That's gonna be their username. Oop, not email. It's just email. And I don't really care to capture much more about them. And then we also need a password hash. Cool. So basically, this is all we really care to know about a user. And again, just gonna rename that to user, rename the file to user as well. And we're just gonna give up on even trying anything with identity. So basically now, instead of doing our authentication like manually, we need to have a provider that does the hash for us, and then we'll just do all of the authentication in our service here, which will make it a lot easier, and we'll just roll our own. Cool. So basically, when a user logs in, we're going to validate the client they came from. If they're providing a password, then we're going to hash the password they provided and check that hashed password against their hash password, which means we need an implementation of our password hash and the key that we're going to be using for hashing it, which, again, I have in another project I can pull up, so let me do that. So I usually have like a hash provider in my data project. I've been doing it mostly this way for like a couple of years, and it's actually driven from it's mostly driven from the original identity hash provider, which is nice. So I just need to figure out where the heck I put that. Bingo. So we're going to add a new class in our data project. So go to data, we'll add a new folder. Where's add? Folder, providers. And then I have the class here called secure hash provider. So basically, if you're not familiar with hashing, it's I guess we do need to have this as an interface, but we'll add in the data side up here in core. The idea is that you have a string that you want to validate and also encrypt, and hashing is like a one-way encryption. And the way that we do it is we actually like take a key and then we iterate over and hash over that with a salt. So every password gets a salt, which is a little bit of a more string you add to it. Then you hash it as many times as you want. In this case, we're going to be doing 1,000 iterations. And then you have that value. And if you pass in the same value, the same hash value will always come out. But you can't reverse it. You can't take the hash value and then try to like unencrypt it. So instead, what we do with passwords is we hash it, and then when we validate against it, we hash the value given to us, and then we check the hashed value as a string. So I calls I hash provider, and this will be an interface, and we'll have a public string hash password that takes in a string. And it doesn't need to be public because we're in an interface. Hash password takes in string password, which means that we can implement this. Cool. So basically that's what we do here is we create a complex hash, which then goes through all this stuff. We need RNG from system cryptography, which also gets us our RFC 2898. And basically these are just like crypto specs just for ways to actually implement a hasher. We create a key, we hash it, and then we basically are good to go from there. So now we want to do this. We need this one as well. Get password match. Oops, this should be a bool. Cool. So we have one method to actually hash a password that then outputs that one, and then we have the get password match where we'll return whether they match or not, where you pass in the one that's passed in and the hashed one. So in our authentication service, we're going to want one of these. So we'll have a private read-only iHash provider. And now we'll inject all these by creating a constructor. Cool. So what we're going to do here is, first thing we need to do is find the user by their username, and then validate the user and the client, or we can actually probably validate the client first. So let's just say like var auth client equals await auth client dot find by ID and secret. So we'll take request dot ID and request dot secret. If auth client is null, then we want to throw an exception. So we'll throw a new invalid operation exception. Technically, we might want our own current state. We'll just throw an empty one for now. I might also switch to using the result pattern here, but we'll throw a new exception that just says invalid client. We'll end up refactoring this, I think, to use the result pattern. It's just a lot nicer here instead of throwing exceptions everywhere. Okay, so now that we have a client and we're valid, we want to get the user and validate the password. So the rest of this is going to be, in this case, if request.grantType equals password. And then we'll have an else if area over here. Grant type equals refresh token. And our final else, we're going to throw another exception. And we'll say invalid grant type. So before we even do this, we can get the user. So we'll say var user equals await, and we need a user repository. So we'll say private read only iUser repository, which we need to build. So let's go back to our repos. We'll add a new interface, iUser repository public interface. We'll have a find by email, string email. So we'll implement that in just a sec, but for now let's just pull it in. And I'm gonna do this. Hey Layla, how's it going? Were you streaming today? Anyway, what I want to do is find my user by their email. So I want to take request.username. And again, if user is null, then we'll throw another exception. Invalid username or password. We don't want to tell them that they have a username but no password that matches, or that they don't have that username, because otherwise basically lets them go. You're playing Dishonored too. Oh, nice. I've been playing a lot of Warzone lately. I don't think I've played Dishonored. Alright, so now based off what grant type we have, we're going to basically separate how we authenticate. So for password, what we want to do is do the password comparison onto identity. Yeah, so I was just spent like the first hour of this trying to do authentication using ASP.NET Core identity. The problem is that I need like so many different ways to authenticate the same user that the route I was heading down was just messy when I used identity, so I gave up on it just about 15 minutes ago, and so now we're just going to roll our own, which will be mostly simplified, but also it's nice just to kind of get into it and sort of see the differences, because basically, like, I don't remember if you were here when we started the project last week, but the idea is that we have, like, our whole product is, like, two ends that we need the same user authenticated in. So, like, if I'm using Alexa to talk, I want to then be able to authenticate against my Windows desktop app that's using the same account to then use the keyboard. Same thing, like I could sign in from like Google or Alexa, and then also like Windows or Mac on the other side, and I need the same person signed in on both sides. And so I have to implement OAuth to implicit grant flow or refresh or auth code grant flow on this side, and then I also need like the same type of authentication but in a different way from the client apps, and it's like I need it everywhere. And like I've used identity before, I just don't like how hard it is to work with it without like using all of it. Like if you go in and you just say, here, take my user account and sign me in, then it's super easy and it does so much for you. But I need to like actually have a little bit more control over when and how users sign in. So it's just like, I know you can, like I was trying to get it pulled out so I could pull the user manager out, but then like I'd have to add like the UI library to my business logic side, and it's like I didn't want that. So we're just gonna keep it nice and clean with a clean architecture, and keep our business logic separate from our data logic, separate from our UI logic and HTTP logic. And yeah, implementing auth E2FA into it was so complicated. Yeah, I've also done some stuff with like Okta and Auth0, but I didn't want to like make a dependency on like a third-party authentication library this time around too. And it's just always such a pain. And honestly, I have more experience just rolling my own at this point with everything else I do. So hopefully it'll be nice and clean. Anyway, if we're signing in with password, we want to, we've got the user, so we have their password hash. Now we want to say, let's say like is password match. And to do that, all we have to do is say hash provider dot match. And then we pass in the hashed password, which will be our user.hash. And then we have the provided password, which is request.password. And if it's not matched, then we want to throw a new exception, and we'll just say invalid username or password. But if they are, then we need to actually say like, hey, you're authenticated. Here are your tokens. And we're going to end up doing the same thing down here after this too. But anyway, now that we're on the refresh token side, we can do this type of validation, and then we'll get into like the token building and generating the JWT with our different claims and stuff like that. Okay, so we want to say var is token match equals await, or let's just say this, var existing token await refresh token repository, and we want to find by token async. So this time we're going to take the request.refresh token, and now we can say if existing token is null, or if the existing token's client client ID.id does not equal the provided one. Basically, we don't want to let people take their tokens that were generated from a different client and use them from a new one. So we have to make sure that if you're using your refresh token, that you're also using it from the same place where you generated it the first time. Request.secret. Then we'll throw another exception. Invalid token or client. And then basically down here at the end of this, we want to generate, actually we'll just do this from here. So now these are going to be basically the same. Like now we know that you're validated either via your token or via your password. And if not, then you've been tossed out. Ugh, Kenzie, this stupid posture check. Fine. And yeah, now we can actually just generate the token. So there's a couple things we can do here. I have this existing as well. Let's do this. I'm just gonna pull something up over here where I've done like the JWT token provider before, and I just want to make sure I know what I'm doing. This is what I want. Okay. So what we have is a method here to generate a token. We don't really need this though. And so what this does is it creates a bunch of claims. We are going to end up needing this setting stuff too, but I'll get rid of that for now. You create a bunch of claims you can actually use, and they all get put within the token, and then we basically encode that token with a key, which, like I said, we're going to end up needing to get this encoding secret set up, and our issuer and audience and stuff like that. And then hopefully I have the library for this. Nope. We need to make sure we install the right version. Oh, we can install the latest. Cool. So basically all of that data gets encoded into a token, so it's just a string. And that's what we actually use to authenticate the user on the way back out. So I need to make sure I pull in security claims, expiration's good, token, 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 give me all my namespaces, sweet. And now I need to actually set up this auth setting. So what I'm going to do is in our models, we'll have a new folder for configuration models. Configuration. And we'll have a model in here for authentication settings. Auth settings. And we need an encoding secret. We need, what else do we have in our service here? Issuer, access token expiration time. Hours, that's fine. Prop, int, that, prop, string, issuer. And so now all we have to do is up here is inject in iOptions, private, read only, iOptions of that auth settings. Auth settings. And we need to inject that here as well. No, come on. Sweet. Now we've got all this good stuff. Alright, so now down here in the, hey, you're authenticated, here are your tokens. What we need is the access token, and we'll generate the token for the user. And then we're going to create a new refresh token. So we'll say var refresh token equals new refresh token. User ID is our user ID. Our auth client ID equals our auth client.id. Created date is UTC now. Modified is UTC now. Expiration is datetime.utcnow.add days, and then we'll add a new setting in auth settings that can be prop int refresh token expiration days. You can work really like in setting something up like this. You can work in like whatever unit you want, but the idea here is just that we want to have an explicit value. That way, like in development, I can be like, oh, my refresh tokens expire in like a year, but in production, we can be like, they expire in 10 days. Because once your refresh token expires, you're signed out. It's essentially the gist of it. So we want to do auth settings value refresh token expiration days. What else do we need here? We need to actually give it a token. So what I'm going to do to generate the tokens for now is we're just going to generate a new GUID to string, and then we honestly that's probably fine. And that's it. So now we can call await refresh token repository add our token. Down here we're going to want to delete this token, the existing one. So we'll say await refresh token repository delete by ID existing token.id. So we added it, which means now we can save. So now we're committing the changes of both the delete and the add if we have that. And now we can return our model. So we'll say return new token response access token is our access token. Refresh token is our refresh token.token. Access expiration is going to be UTC datetime UTC now add hours, and this is that auth settings value access token expiration hours. Refresh token expiration is our refresh token expiration, and our user ID is our user ID. Sweet. So what we can try to do now, oh, I just realized we actually need to like totally blow away our database that we already made. Do I still have pgadmin open? I'm going to drop this database, and we're going to make a new one from scratch. Cool. So we've got our local database. We need to actually update it, which we did from here before, although we need to add a migration. I'm actually just going to delete my existing migrations as well and just recreate those, because we just totally ripped out identity, and I'd rather just start from scratch. A new initial migration. Unable to create an object. What do you mean? Security considerations. In general, the only things that we're actually storing are some means of authenticating, which will do email and password. And then the only other stuff about the user we really care about is their preferences for like their keyboard macros and everything else. So in terms of actual like security setup, as long as our password is hashed and we're able to validate that the authentication requests are coming from one of our applications, which is like going to be probably like 15 to 20 different applications, from like Alexa skills to Google Actions to Bixby capsules to Android apps, iOS apps, and desktop apps, and everything in between. As long as we know that it's coming from one of those explicitly, then we can control it. So in general, the way that we're setting it up is we'll have an auth client table, which will have like its own ID and secret, and these ones are going to be controlled exclusively from me, basically, by just actually manually entering them into Postgres, and then we'll have the reference to the IDs and secrets in the specific apps when you're authenticating. Not sure if you like needed any more particular answers. That's basically it. Beyond that, just making sure the passwords are salted and hashed is like the gist of it. What was I just missing? There was something else. Oh yeah, we still need to get the migration working. I don't know if it's just because something's not building, but it just said it couldn't create an instance of our DB context, which it most certainly should be able to. Let's try this again. Oh, it might just be because I need to have my startup project be my API. No? Older than 303. Where are we not? Why are we using 3? Yeah, I mean, like some other stuff that you normally have to consider, not normally, but in other applications is also like role management, scope management, especially when you're handling OAuth. But the thing is, like, the actual like user preferences side of this is all there is to it. So it's literally like sign in and then get, read, update their preferences for different like game or software profiles they want to have set up for their keyboard. So like scope wise, it's just you have access to that one data set because that's all that really matters. So other times you have to worry about roles, different role management, other authentication means. I might need to set up 2FA, which will have something we can add on later where basically we just need to generate like another set of temporary tokens that you then have to validate against from your user that live temporarily. I've done stuff like that before in the past as well, so it's not too bad. But for now, we're just going to like start from very simple, like sign in with your username and password, and then we'll end up adding like the auth code grant flow and stuff like that. But right now I can't figure out why I can't get my damn migration working. Unable to create an object of type Suave Keys context for the different patterns supported at design time. See this. Why can you not create it? What did I do? Fine, I'll follow your link. Don't need this open anymore, I don't think. Why don't you like me? I don't want that. I don't need any of this identity crap anymore. That might have been it though. Please migrate. Why? Continuing with, oh, hold on. While accessing Microsoft Extensions hosting, continuing without the application service provider. Why is this? Why are we still getting this issue? I have nothing in here that needs Razor. Stupid weather forecast. What is this? Why? Why is it looking for Razor? This is the issue we were seeing before. Totally different app too. Like that was like one of the reasons we dropped the identity one. Let's see. That's fine. It's literally a localhost connection string. Maybe I just need to restart Visual Studio. I'm gonna clean and restart VS. Goodbye. I don't know what I did to make it think that I need a 303 version of Razor when trying to just build an API, but hopefully it leaves me alone. Cannot load file or assembly. Who told you to load that? I don't even have any pages. Like, we have this controller that we were using before all this. There's got to be some weird-ass dependency that we added. Delete this. What changes could we possibly have made? Let's see. Oh, this? I can get rid of that. Be gone. Please run. Okay, so whatever having that identity server thing is just absolutely blew it up. Having issues with deep dependency. Yeah, it's just the way it is, I think. Like, so I just wanted to get rid of the identity stuff. I can probably actually just get rid of this too, but we'll leave it for now. Okay, so now can I run my damn migration, please? Or at least give me a migration. Aha! Alright, in Infradata, let's take a look at this. Yeah, it was, I had the identity server. We're good now. Okay, we got all our tables and stuff. So now I can call update. Right? Update, update. Where's my update one? That one. Now we can get the table actually made. I'm going to add all the Swagger stuff to this too, which we've done in a few different projects. I'm going to go open up like our Dark Souls controller, make sure I don't forget anything. So let's go add Swashbuckle. So I'm just pulling up a reference here that we did for our Dark Souls voice controller API as well, because we did like a bunch of stuff here to get Swagger set up and all that. And now that we're doing it for real, I just want to make sure I get all the things right. Use Swagger. I wonder if this will get picked up with like the recommended NuGet. Apparently not. There's some other stuff we had to do here. We wanted this because it makes Alexa happier. Need the whole add MVC. It's fine. We'll end up getting all these random NuGet things that we need. Okay, we're almost there. Suave Keys. What are the specific versions that we installed last week? Swashbuckle and this. Sweet. Which means I can just haphazardly throw those up here. Also, Layla, NuGet got thrown into AutoMod's chain. I don't know if you saw that. But now I had to explicitly allow NuGet as a phrase. It's pretty funny. Alright. We're just missing namespaces now. I'm also going to update just my default launch setting to not go there. I want to just default everything to Swagger. Cool, 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 cool. So we're almost at the point of actually testing the authentication. Let's make sure all of this swashbuckle goodness is set up. And then what I'm going to do... Alright, cool. This is what we were using from the Alexa side via our Voicify app to actually validate some stuff. So we're getting our webhook calls. So let's go add a new controller. Google EF. Oh, I haven't tried doing EF with Mongo. outside of like the sandbox that they have set up, because that just sounds like a nightmare. Now try adding EF with identity on top of Mongo. Let me know how it goes. Okay, we get authentication controller. This will inherit from API controller, right? No, I don't want that. I would just want controller base. Route. We're going to stick to our other route like we did for the Voicify one. So we'll have API/controller name. Private read-only user authentication service. Auth service. Okay, we're gonna have a post, and we'll just say authenticate, public async task of iAction result. Actually, we can just turn token response iAction result. Authenticate. I'll just do like a from body for now of our authentication request. Authentication. Oh my gosh. Authentication request. But technically, to fit the OAuth spec, we have to support the get calls. Honestly, I've never liked EF. I don't mind it. Not having to remember SQL all the time is super nice. Like it's just like the initial setup can be such a pain if like you need to do some extra stuff. But once it's set up and you kind of cruise with it, it's pretty good. Yeah, debugging can be tough. It does make testing and mocking pretty easy though. Okay, if we get an exception, then I want to return a bad request. I'm going to pass the exception message. This is super sketch, by the way. We should only be doing this if we get one of ours. I don't want to have like a, hey, you failed to connect with your database with this password exception, which is why we'll end up going to the result pattern. Refactor to result pattern. I think that's going to just be important to have going forward anyway. Okay, so we'll say var response equals await auth service dot authenticate user, and we'll return an OK with response. So now we just need to basically make sure everything is set up for dependency injection, and then we'll also have this. Let's do this. HTTP get test, and we'll put an authorize, and we'll have a public bool auth test, and we'll return true. So basically what I want to try to do is sign in. Once we've signed in and get our token, I want to be able to pass that token up as the bearer token. So we're going to be doing bearer authentication. And then when we hit this endpoint with get, if we get a unauthorized response back, we'll know that we're not authenticated. But if we get it back, then that's like whole round trip is done, and now we have some means of authenticating, which is sort of like the biggest goal of today. Is like once we have a means of authenticating and validating and doing the expirations and stuff like that, like then we can build on top of it. Then we can build auth code grant flow. Then we can build the actual implicit grant flow to spec, which might actually be all we need for this setup, but for now, we can always add auth code grant flow, especially once we need third parties to authenticate. But if we have implicit grant flow set up, we have the means to authenticate a user. We have the means to actually get their information based off of who they are and stuff like that too, which will be nice. But there's some other stuff we still need to set up to actually be able to authenticate. So first of all, we're going to have this add for setting up authentication. So we're going to also add app.use authentication. And then I'm going to have this private iService, actually I'll just do private void add bearer auth. And that's going to take in the iService collection, old services, and we already have the configuration. So basically what we're doing is telling, oops, let's do this, configuration. I think we just called this auth settings. We're basically telling ASP.NET Core that we have the ability to authenticate users using bearer, or handle authorized users using bearer authentication. So we're going to send up our access token in the authorized header with the bearer prefix, and then that we're giving it that key that we use for encoding the token in the first place. That way it can decode it and basically pull out all of the claims and stuff. So that way all we have to do on certain endpoints to authorize and block users who are not signed in is just throw an authorized tag up here. And that way we can also learn more about the user as we go, because we can pull out their user ID and their email and stuff like that, which is great. So all we have to do now is get all this set up, which means we also need to pull in our tokens, the JWT token one specifically, and make sure we have the right version. So we'll install with package manager. That's the one, and we want 303, so that's the version we've been using for everything else. And someday we'll update to 315. Cool. Pull in our namespaces. I think this should have installed the other one too. All right, cool. Yeah, so we're good. Right. So now, right here, when we're adding all of our other services, we also want to say add bearer auth and pass in services. I kind of like the extension method approach, but for now we'll just do this. And we need to actually add all of our own custom stuff. So this is like our code. So services dot add scoped. So we need all of our repositories. So we need the iUser repository, which I don't think we've implemented yet. And I want a user repository. Yeah, I don't think we need to go back and implement this. We'll get the other one set up and then we'll head over there. Services, add scoped iRefresh token repository with a refresh token repository. Then we get our namespaces. We need our auth client. Services, add scoped iAuth client. Now that we've got, oh, come on, auth client repository. Ooh, something got really weird there. And then we need our service, add scoped. We need our iUser authentication service, and that's a user authentication service. So now the last thing we need is just this user repository. Oh, and the hash provider. One more thing. Services, add scoped iHash provider with our secure hash provider. All right, let's go implement the user repository. So in infrastructure data in our repositories, I think the only thing we have in there is find by email. Eventually we'll have sign up too. Oh, I totally need to add sign up first. All right, hold on. User repository. So just like our other ones, we've got our handy dandy base entity for user, and it's got to implement iUser repository if I know how to spell. Generate our constructor and implement the interface. So we want to do an async. We'll do return await data where users email to lower equals email to lower dot first or default async. Alright, now we at least have that, which means this is happy, which means technically if we had a hashed user with a password, we should be able to sign in, but we also need the ability to actually create a user and have them sign up. So let's implement that, and we also need to add our auth settings in here as well. So we'll do auth settings just before I forget. And there's a few properties we need there. Basically, if we side by side these, we need to have each one of these represented. So we've got that. That's going to end up being a string. We've got access token expiration hours, which, because this is only in development, I'm going to say I've got 4 hours for each one. We've got refresh token expiration days. I'm going to say 365. On my local host, I can stay signed in for an entire year. And for issuer, I'll have localhost. So for the secret, we can do a couple different things here. Let me see if I can find this. Like, really just needs to be a random string. So one of the things I like to do for that is generate 2 GUIDs, side by side them, and then just base 64 encode them. Encode. Boom. Encode it. Now that is what we're going to be encoding our tokens with, or in this case our hashed stuff. Alright, Suave Keys, encoding secret. Yeah, Layla, there's a repo. I'll throw it in chat real quick before you head out. It's Suave Keys. There you are. Enjoy your dinner. For me, it's still afternoon in Boston, so I'll be up for a little while. We're going to put in probably like another hour of work into this today. I just want to be able to get to the point where we can authenticate. But yeah, see you, Layla. Boom, boom. Goodbye. Don't need that stupid stuff anymore. Okay, we've got our encoding secret. You might be hungry. Cassie, go get lunch. Alright, we've got a user repository. We also need to be able to add a user. So do async task user add, and it'll just take a user called entity, and we'll await data add async entity, and we'll return entity. See you, Layla. Yeah, see you, Cassie, too, if you're going to head out. Thanks for stopping by. Sync task save changes async, return await context save changes async. We're just going to expose that. I guess we don't need to return it. What don't you like? Oh, we already have it. That's right. We just need it on the interface. Alright, we're going to take this. We want our add. And we want our save changes async. Cool. So let's go create a user service. This is where you'll be able to sign up. So for this, we're going to need a user repository. And we're also going to need our hash provider, because when we take in the user's create request, we're going to want to hash their password before we store it. So I have a private read-only iHash provider. I think that's all we really need to inject here. Come on, give me my namespace. Cool. So let's see. For transfers, we're going to need a request to get a user. Let's call this users. We'll have a new user request, which will take in an email and a password, and we can add some validation in here. This is going to be required, and it's an email address, and this is required, and we need a user model for what we're going to be returning out. And this is going to have our optional first name, last name. Oops. String, last name, and then the email. And we can generate this from our entity. So basically, we need in our user service a public async task of user model. Oops, user model. It is create user, and that'll take in a new user request. Sweet. So we can generate our entity. So entity equals new user. Email is request.email, and password hash is our hash provider, hash password, and we'll take request.password. Then we can say await entity equals await user repository, add entity. We can now save. We don't need to do anything else. And then we can return a new model where the email is our entity.email. And we can worry about like the first name, last name stuff. I mean, I might even just get rid of it. I don't really care to have that information about my users, so they really just need their email. Awesome. Which means we now just need to create an interface for this. Have an iUser service. And I'm just going to go grab the thing here. Give me all the namespaces. Now we also need a controller for this as well. Oops, didn't want that. Add class user controller. So now with our user controller, this is where we'll be able to like get current user or add a new user and stuff like that. For now, we'll just focus on just creating it. That way we can validate the authentication. And then we should basically be good to go once we add all this stuff to dependency inject it. API/controller, because that's how we've been consistent with everything else so far. And we got a private read-only iUser service. Generate constructor. Now we need an HTTP post. Create user. Action result. From the request body, we want to take that new user request. Model. Var result equals await user service create user with model, and then we're going to return result. Return OK. Working with some strong assumptions here that everything's going to work out all right. Like I said, we'll add the result pattern in a little bit, and that'll help sort of add some of that security around it. Cool. So now we just need to add our add scoped user service, and hopefully we're good to go here. Oh, this needs to actually implement the thing. These are already injected and set up. So back in our startup, we've got hash provider, user repository, refresh token repository, and auth client repository. So we should be able to run this, create a user, and then sign in with that user against the client. Now, one thing we do need to add, oops, cannot parse JSON file. My settings wrong. Oh, also we need to actually, forgetting a couple things. We need to do services .configure, and we want to do auth settings. We can say configuration.get section name of auth settings. I think there's something else we have to do here too. Is it like services.add options? Configure options first? Is that what we need to do? Doesn't this like... Okay. Said there was an issue reading my JSON. Oh, we're missing a comma. Figures. All right. Now we should be able to run it. And then what I need to do, so we're getting Swagger up. Hopefully everything runs. Nope, we hit an exception somewhere. No iConfigure options or post-configure options were implemented. What did I mess up here? Do I even need that? What did we do for Dark Souls controller? I don't know if we did anything. I don't even know if we have options that we're configuring. No, we don't. We literally, it's so simple. Alright, let's just see if we can run it anyway. I'm going to set a breakpoint in our auth service just to also step through and show you all what's sort of going on there. If we go to auth service. I'll put a breakpoint there. Alright, at least we're up and running now. Hopefully this works and we still get our options injected. But for example, if I try to hit this GET request without anything, I get a 401 back because I'm not authenticated. Oh, I do need to add something else here to actually let me do OAuth with Swagger. But so that's cool. We get our 401, which is to be expected. But I need the ability to actually, like, let's see, is it this one? Do the whole Swagger bearer auth stuff, and there's like some extra stuff you have to grab, and I've got that existing code somewhere too. Extensions, this. I think it's this stuff. So when we add Swagger Gen in startup, some more things we got to do here. Should just be C. C. Hopefully this still works the same way. Uh-oh. Oh, it's like open API schema. What else do we need? Name. Some of this stuff changed. How do I do this? Is it not schema? Hold on. What was the original one I had? It's basically like this code I have is from key scheme open API security scheme. That's what it is. And then this doesn't like something here. This wants an open API security requirement. New open API security requirement. What is going on here? I just want bearer. How do I just say that I need bearer? What is this? Bearer format. Scheme, the name of the HTTP authorization scheme. This is bearer. Alright, I think that's fine then. Maybe. Or it's not going to be fine. Add security requirement. What is on this? What can I even put on this? Oh, it is a dictionary. Ugh. What was the it was a dictionary of open API security scheme to list. New open API security scheme. The scheme is bearer. And we have a new string array of 0. Fine. New list string. Alright, this feels closer-ish. Let's see if we get all this stuff set up when we run it. So while that's running, I need... pull this over here. Cool, now we got authorize and it says bearer in your API key. Oh, not in query though. How do I specify where it goes? I want it in the header. Oh, now there's in. What? Header. Rerun it. Anyway, like I was saying, what is this talking about? Parameter location. Ugh. Oh. Parameter location dot header. Alright, cool. Now it should work when we have that set up. So, what I need to do, let's get rid of that, is add a refresh. Suave Keys. I need to add an auth client in here for myself. So we'll say view all data. I'm going to spin up my GUID generator. So I need a GUID for an ID. Okay. We'll just generate another one and base64 encode it for the secret, just so it's kind of consistent with the format. There's our secret. And we'll say this is Swagger testing. And I'm fine with that. Save it. Nope, need to create a date. 2020 07 12. Oops. Yay. Alright. So now we can pass this up as our client ID and our client secret. Which is great. I can collapse all this stuff and expand this so I can actually see them. Now let's see if we can't create a user. So first we're going to create a new user. We're not doing any email validation or anything, so I'll keep user at example.com, and the password will be password123. How original. Error. Unable to track an entity of type user because primary ID is null. Oh, I forgot Entity Framework Core doesn't do that for us anymore. Ugh. So on each of our entities, unfortunately, what we should do is set a default value. So we can do GUID, new, to string, and we need a semicolon there. So back in Entity Framework 2.x, it would generate these IDs for you. You can also like build a generator, which we might want to do in the future, but for now, to like get that to work, we can just specify some default values, where if you don't have one, it'll set it for you. Now let's see if we can't create a user. Create user, same thing, user at example.com, password 123. Alright, we've got a user. So now what I want to do is see if I can't authenticate that user. So client ID, let's just pin these. Client ID is this. Client secret is this. Username is, what is it? Example, user at example.com. Grant type is password. Password is password123, and we don't need a refresh token. Alright, so stepping through, we've got our request. We've got all the stuff in it. So let's go get our auth client. We have our auth client, the one we just made in the database, so we've got that Swagger testing one. We find the user by email, which is there because we just created that user, so that's great, that's working. Request grant type is password, so now we do that password hash match. It is a match. So now we generate a new access token. It's going to look like this. It's going to have a whole bunch of stuff in it. We generate a refresh token. We add the refresh token and save, and then we return that response out. Perfect. So now in our response, we've got this access token. So if you remember, when we hit this test, we get a 401 back because we're not authorized. That endpoint has an authorized attribute on it. So hopefully, if everything worked out right, we can now put in this bearer token. And now all of our requests that we send from Swagger should be sending up that bearer token, which should then be handled by our authorization middleware. So now if I hit execute here, I should see a 200 response instead of a 401. And the output should say true because I think we return a Boolean. Okay, so something else is not working with our authorization setup. Let's figure out what. Probably something in our configuration. So you've got add bearer auth. We get the section here. Get the encoding secret. I wonder if this didn't work. Although we probably would have seen an exception there. We generate a signing key. We take auth issuer. What are we missing here? Let's step through the actual setup of this on the add bearer auth. Give treats to my pets. I don't have any pets down here right now. I'll give it to them after the stream. Alright, we've got our configuration settings. Value is null. So we're not pulling this in at this point. Why is that? Let me do this. Basically, we should be getting these values, but for some reason we're not. Although we did get them on the authentication side, as far as I can tell. Or like in this generate token, let's see if we have our auth settings values. Let's just let that run. I have to go through the sign-in again. There's something I'm missing here. We have add authentication. We have use authentication. We have use authorization. Technically, are we technically doing it twice? No, we're not calling add auth anywhere else. Does the order matter? Is that why? Does this need to be in a different order? Maybe we don't need this authorization since we're rolling our own. Let's try this. We have a breakpoint. So there's still something still seems to be weird here with getting auth settings, as it has no value. Oh no, it is pulling it in. Oh yeah, it's working. Okay. Alright, so do I still have it copied? Bearer. Yeah. 500. Contains authorization when middleware was not found. Oh, okay, so we do need that. But why are you not authorized? Bearer. Is it not actually sending it up right? I wonder if it's not sending it in the header. What we can do is monitor the network while we're calling it. Get rid of this breakpoint because we know our stuff is actually working. Alright, authorize bearer, that stuff. Close, test, execute. 401. Alright, request headers. It's not actually sending up the authorization header. So that feels like it's a Swagger config issue. Which is fine. So in our Swiggity Swagger setup, what else we got here? Type equals OAuth 2. Keeps opening over there. Couldn't render N. What? Alright, it clearly doesn't like something about that combo. Alright, let's just look it up. Not that. Not that. Swashbuckle ASP.NET Core 3.0 bearer token. Bearer token. Add security definition for bearer. Description. Token only. Bearer format is JWT. Is that why? Excludes the protected endpoints with operation filter. It's a set. You just set scheme to bearer. Maybe it needs to be all lowercase. Let's see what else we got. Type is HTTP. Just fine. I don't even know if we need that. Name, header, reference. Is that what we need? Open API reference. Type security scheme. Reference. Header. ID. Bearer. Is that what they did? Okay. Try it again. See if we get anything sent up. I'm gonna keep a tab of this separate in our normal browser window. Cannot resolve reference. So components header does not exist in the document. Maybe we don't need that. Try again. Here we go. Oh shoot. We gotta actually sign in again. It's fine, I'm gonna do it in the other browser tab anyway. Alright. Grab our ID in secret. ID. Secret. Username. is user@example.com. Password 123. We can get rid of this breakpoint. We know all this stuff works. Got our access token. Bearer. Close. Alright, let's monitor the network here too. Now we hit test, execute, 401. It looks like it's still not sending up the header. Like our request header should have an authorize or an authorization header. Which means we're still missing something. Let's try this. I want this to be scheme. Wait, that's not right. Scheme is different. No, it is. They just typoed it. Alright. See if this works. Okay, before I refresh, I'm going to grab my token. I'm actually just going to throw that in a browser tab. Bearer. Wait. I didn't need all of it. I think we've got... Oh, yeah, that's right. Bearer. Okay. Test, please. No. It's still not sending it up. Let's see. Swashbuckle, not sending bearer token. Using everything applied conditionally. Including automatic encoding. That's basic auth though. Oh my gosh, this guy's so overkill. Don't use to get authorization header included. You must define it entirely using security schemes, which we just did. Why would I have to do that? Which was that I had? This was overriding anything. I don't think we have any operations filters on though. Unless it's like I actually need one now. Super annoying. This is working for me. Okay, basically we just need some sort of operation filter to actually add it. Like, why is this required now? Like, why? It wasn't before. I'm just gonna throw it in here anyway. And then options, add it. In my ad swag again. Alright, let's try it. Once we can authenticate, like, we're in such a good spot to like build the rest of this stuff, because then like we can have user records and you can sign up from like a web app that we'll build and everything else. It'd be so nice. Okay, we're going to take that, refresh this, authorize, please authorize. Still nothing. It is still not sending it up. What the hell? Just send it, please. Come on. Boop. Let's try to simplify this, I guess. Alright. Back over here. Take that. Back. Bearer. Please send the bearer token. Oh, it's double sending bearer, so we don't have to actually put in the bearer prefix. Yes! We're authenticated. Alright, so now we've got total custom user authentication. We can just throw authorize all over it. It also means like we can return your user ID, for example. We can like pull that out of your claims. So let's say I go to that auth controller, just right here. Like instead of just returning true, I could say like request return request dot where is it? It might just be here. User dot claims. All right, why don't we just do that? We'll return a list of claims. Dot to list. Alright, so now if I run this and authenticate against it, which I should still be authenticated here with the same thing. So instead of just getting true, self-referencing loop, ugh. What if I just return claims dot first or default? Then can I do it? Oh, this is gonna yell at me. It's not gonna run. Duh. What if we, let's just get the string. Alright, so when we create the user, or create the token, we're adding these claims like name identifier. So if I get the claims at claim name identifier, then like dot value, then we should be good. So if we say at this, dot first or default, where the claims, not issuer type, equals that dot value. This should be the actual user ID. Hopefully, anyway. So it should look like a GUID. We can even check to like make sure it's the right user after we get it. So back over here now, if I hit it, this is our GUID. This is our user ID that we pulled out of the token, which means that now we can like use that for lookups and pull up preferences and all that cool stuff. So once we have, what is this, FFA2, right? That's what it starts with, just to sort of validate it. If I go over to my user table in Postgres, you can see we have FFA2. You'll also notice that our password is actually encrypted and it doesn't say password 123 here, because that's how we secure stuff. Looking at you, blog post person from before, and we have no first name or last name because those are optional. We might not even ever need those, but yeah, so that's it. We can actually authenticate now and then use that to make authorized requests in the future. So the next sort of set of things we need to do is actually support the implicit grant flow. We should first check to make sure our refresh token logic works. I want to clean this up and use the result pattern. And then after that, we should try to actually authenticate from the Alexa side. So we'll have the ability to sign in here. We need to create the user interface and web app for signing in with implicit grant flow. And then try to sign in from like the Alexa skill. And once we have the account linking stuff working with the Alexa skill, we should be good to go. And start to actually send requests over. So like I kind of want to like, I'm just kind of brainstorming here, but like, you know, we talk about the two ends of this whole platform, from like the voice receiving side to like basically action executed side, like whatever the receiving client is. So I want to get all of like the user authentication side set up on my left, I guess probably you're right when you're looking at me, but the voice consumption side. So I want to get authentication on Alexa and Google and wherever else we deploy to working. Basically everything pre-Voicify. And then once we have that, we can then start to build out the entire right side, because we already have the scaffolding for that whole other side, because we have our app that we had set up previously. I don't know if it's going to be up over here. Let me just make sure I'm signed into the right account before showing you everything, which I am not. Right, so we already have our Suave Keys app. Like we already have our command set up. So if I say type whatever, we hear it back. So for example, if I say, Alexa, tell Suave Keys to type hello. We gotta wait for our potato server to spin up, but what's happening there is we have our Voicify controller.
Typing. What else?
Type hello world. And that's running through this code here where we get...
Typing hello world. What else?
Press spacebar. And we'll say this.
Pressing spacebar. What else?
Exit. So we already have all of that set up, and we have it, I think, on Alexa and Google.
Sounds like you said something
Alexa,
I can't handle
exit.
yet.
Which means that like once we authenticate that side, like that's almost entirely done. Like we'll have the interface in the UI for doing the sign up, which will be a good step to having the web client too. But like that's like one of the hardest halves. The other half is literally just going to be signing in from like a UWP app, a Mac app, wherever else, and then receiving those requests over WebSockets, which now that we have the authentication here, we can even like register the user from the WebSocket side against their authenticated user, and now we're in the position to send down the request just to that specific user when they're connected. And then it's just the app that then talks to the Arduino and stuff like that, and we get all the preference management. So what I want to do is get the left side authentication all the way working, the assistant side, all the authentication stuff we need there. Once that's done, we'll get the client app running on at least UWP, with signing in to the same user account and validate that we can send requests only from the same user all the way down and have something typed and have something key pressed. And then from there, there's a ton of other features we're going to be adding. Like I've talked about before, we're going to have different profiles for different pieces of software you can run. So if I'm playing Call of Duty, I can go choose to say like, oh, use the Call of Duty profile. That way when I say press reload, it will do the reload action because it'll have the mapping and stuff like that. And we'll have a whole interface for setting up mappings and macros and all that fun stuff. And then from there, we're just building out other clients, Android apps, iOS apps, other channels in the same way. And we're then sort of good to go there. So I'm excited about all that. For now, I think I'm going to stop here because we're at a good spot. We have user authentication. We have the ability to create a user account and sign them in and validate that they are signed in, which means we can start working on just building to the OAuth spec and do account linking on Alexa and Google next. So I'll be back on Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and we'll get account linking working on Google and Alexa with our custom user accounts, and that's the goal. So thanks for watching. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for everyone in the chat. Always a pleasure. It's still pretty warm out here, so I'm going to go jump in the pool. And I'll see you all on Wednesday. So peace out.